When it comes to professional bodybuilding, fans and pundits alike usually focus on the stories of lifters who have taken themselves from skinny nobodies to massively muscled individuals you could barely consider human. It's the nature of the endeavor. You tend to want to think about the positive effects of bodybuilding, the success stories, and all the while, never give much consideration to what happens once an individual's bodybuilding journey comes to an end. Not every bodybuilder is like Robbie Robinson or Jay Cutler and keeps their gains for all time. Some bodybuilders end up losing their gains and all the glory that came with it. This list of bodybuilding standouts are examples of the top pros who reached the pinnacle of the sport and have now regressed and lost all their gains. Number 1. Mustafa Mohammad. One of the biggest mystery cases in bodybuilding, Mustafa Mohammad was a bodybuilder who showed great promise. In his 20s, he won 2 world titles outside of the IFBB and looked like he could potentially dominate the competition. Then he retired suddenly, only to return 9 years later. While he was still physically impressive, he was never quite able to get to the top of the sport. Fast forward another decade, and it would appear that all of Mustafa's gains have left him. Despite that, he still had one of the most memorable physiques in bodybuilding history. Number 2. Pierre Fux. In the case of Pierre Fux, an unfortunate mishap in the gym proved to be his undoing. At the height of his powers, Fux was an absolute mass monster who turned heads at every competition. He had the size and the physique to take his career very far. But ultimately, it was a squatting accident that would prove to halt his career. While he still tried his best to train after his knees were destroyed, ultimately, he had to give up on the idea of continuing his bodybuilding career and lost his gains as a result. Number 3. Bob Paris. Often considered one of the most aesthetic bodybuilders in the sport's history, Bob Paris was a high-level competitor during the 80s and the era of Lee Haney. He was known for his artistic approach to posing and was clearly one of the best bodybuilders of his era. Eventually, he would retire from the sport in 1991. Since then, Paris has become a civil rights advocate, has performed in stage plays and on television, and has written a number of books. Since that time, it's clear that he hasn't hit the weights with relish for some time, as his gains have all but vanished. Number 4. Chris Cormier. Chris Cormier, a well-known in the bodybuilding industry, started competing as a light heavyweight in the NPC Nationals in the 1987, finishing at first place, and started a long and quite successful career of competing at the biggest stages of bodybuilding, including Mr. Olympia. Many believed that he could have been a Mr. Olympia champ if it wasn't for a spinal infection in 2006 that took him out of the sport for an extended period of time in his prime. After Chris Cormier recovered from the injury, he decided to share his 30-plus years of knowledge with all future athletes. But in recovering from a spinal surgery came with serious consequences, the loss of gains. Number 5. Gunter Schlierkamp. Known as the Gentle Giant, Gunter Schlierkamp was one of the top pros to come out of Germany. He cracked the top 10 at the Olympia from 2002 to 2006 and proved to be one of the top pros at the time. Eventually he retired and moved on to acting, where he has snagged a number of roles, including his turn in the 2006 cult classic Beerfest. Since then, however, Gunter's gains have gone the way of the dinosaurs. Number 6. Tom Prince. In his heyday, Tom Prince was an absolute beast of a man. With an off-season weight of 312 pounds and a competitive weight of 230, Prince pushed his body past its limits in order to compete at the highest levels of the sport. But it's perhaps that weight disparity that ultimately caused his downfall. Cutting 82 pounds to get down to his competition weight, along with many other factors, caused Prince's kidneys to fail, which ultimately led him to retirement. Since then, his body has completely shrunk, leaving no trace of the massive muscle he once possessed. Number 7. Paul Dillet. Dillet was one big monster freak among the freaks. He was 188 centimeters tall and a staggering weight of 287 pounds on the stage. Not only did he pack a ton of muscle during his competitive years, but he was also shredded to the bone. In 1994, at the Arnold Classic, he suffered a major muscle cramp caused by severe dehydration, which caused him to freeze on stage for some time. Dillet continued to compete until his retirement in 2006. His best placing at the Olympia was 4th place at the 1994 Mr. Olympia and 3rd place at the Arnold Classic. Just like all the other bodybuilders in this list, time hasn't been kind with his gains. Number 8. Ronnie Coleman. The king of bodybuilding, the 8-time Mr. Olympia winner, and one of the biggest and strongest bodybuilders in modern history, Ronnie Coleman was the supreme ruler of bodybuilding world during the early 2000s. No one could even come close to his massive physique, symmetry, and strength. Ronnie isn't just one of the best in the history of the sport. He was one of the strongest and hardest working competitors. He was famous for his 2,000 pounds leg press, 800 pounds squats, and 200 pounds dumbbell chest presses. This attitude spreads far beyond just lifting too. Ronnie Coleman gave 100% to every single thing he was involved in. This includes his original day job as a police officer. He retired from competing in 2007 after placing 4th in his last Mr. Olympia competition. Since then, Coleman has been working on his supplement line and dealing with multiple back and hip surgeries he picked up from all those years of heavy lifting. After 12 spine surgeries and facing the possibility of never being able to walk again, he had to relearn how to walk. Eventually, he got back on his feet and resumed training. He slowly started lifting weights again, but his once monstrous size had severely diminished. Number 9. Flex Wheeler. Kenneth Flex Wheeler is an American professional bodybuilder. He's one of the bodybuilders for whom steroids turned out to be really disastrous. In his career, he won the Arnold Classic 4 times, which was a record for his time. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself described Flex Wheeler as one of the greatest bodybuilders he had ever seen for his pleasing symmetry. But in 1999, Wheeler discovered that he had focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, a kidney disease. Even though the condition was in his inheritance, steroid use made it a lot worse for him. In 2019, he actually had to get his right leg amputated as a result of this health issue. Now, Wheeler has started going back to the gym, but after going through all this, his body got pretty bad. Number 10. Kevin Levrone. Kevin Levrone is a retired American IFBB professional bodybuilder. Throughout his professional bodybuilding career, he competed in 68 different IFBB professional contests. Among these 68 contests, he placed runner-up in Mr. Olympia in 1992, 1995, 2000, and 2002. Besides that, he was also the winner of the Arnold Classic in 1994 and 1996. His remarkable ability to train quickly for competitions, as opposed to year-long training, was a notable aspect of his approach. However, in 2003 he retired, and after that he made some crazy comebacks, again in 2016 and 2018. In 2016, after a 13-year hiatus from professional bodybuilding, Levrone made a comeback at Mr. Olympia at the age of 51. Though he didn't place in the top contenders, his return was celebrated for his dedication and impressive physique at his age. He also participated in the Arnold Classic Australia in 2018, marking his final competition. But now he's lost pretty much all his muscle mass.